a lot of the biggest retail chains in the country aren't really suffering because they lack customers. The real issue is that shoppers have fundamentally shifted how they spend their money. 12 of the largest retail giants in America could be heading into some of the most critical months they've ever faced. What makes this especially striking is that several of these companies were once seen as almost untouchable in their dominance. However, as consumers tighten their budgets, move more of their shopping online, and become far more deliberate before spending, even the most well-known and trusted brands are beginning to show warning signs. And some of the companies that appear later on might end up surprising you the most. Number 12 on the list is Big Lots. There was a period when, as soon as household budgets started tightening, many people naturally gravitated toward Big Lots. Not because it was a premium shopping destination, but because it offered a simple promise. Stretch your money a little further than usual. Whether it was a new chair, a set of bed sheets, or small home essentials, it was the kind of place where you could make your home feel more comfortable without spending much. That's what makes the situation around Big Lots so important to look at. The issue isn't just one retail chain running into financial difficulty. It also reflects a broader shift in how families are managing their money. As everyday costs like groceries, rent or mortgages, insurance, and other essentials continue to rise, the "I'll buy it later" category of spending is shrinking fast, sometimes disappearing entirely. That creates a serious challenge for a brand that was originally built for exactly those moments when people needed to save. But this time, the environment feels different. Even traditional discount retailers are feeling the pressure. According to publicly available financial restructuring documents, the company has been dealing with significant debt and has been reducing its footprint by closing or scaling back operations in multiple locations across the country. But perhaps an even more important sign is how customers themselves are reacting. More shoppers are starting to feel that Big Lots no longer offers the same level of value it once did. Many compare prices with competitors like Walmart, Costco, or online marketplaces, and come to the conclusion that the difference isn't as large as it used to be. In many stores, that perception is reinforced by what people see in person: fewer staff on the floor, partially empty or thinner-looking shelves, and an overall shopping experience that doesn't quite match what longtime customers remember. For any discount-focused retailer, that's a serious warning sign. Because Big Lots isn't just selling furniture or household goods, it's selling the idea that living on a tight budget can still feel manageable. And once that sense of value starts to fade, everything else becomes much harder to sustain. Maybe that's why this list begins here, with Big Lots. It's not just the story of one company. It reflects a much wider reality that many households are already experiencing. Even the stores designed to help people save money don't feel as helpful as they once did. Number 11 is Joann. There's one key difference between Joann and most of the other companies on this list. Essential spending is unavoidable. People need groceries, medicine, and basic necessities no matter what. But very few households absolutely need to buy fabric, yarn, or craft supplies in any given week. That distinction is exactly what defines Joann. For decades, it was the go-to place for families picking up holiday decorations, sewing materials for quilts, or simply spending time on creative hobbies they genuinely enjoyed. In a way, Joann wasn't just selling fabric. It was selling creativity and hands-on expression. And that's where the challenge begins. When household budgets come under pressure, discretionary spending is usually the first area to be reduced. Not because people lose interest in their hobbies, but because other financial obligations take priority. When even the things people enjoy start getting cut back, it usually signals that financial strain is deeper than what you see on the surface. Joann has clearly felt that pressure. At its peak, the company operated over 800 stores nationwide. But after years of declining sales combined with mounting debt, it was forced to file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in order to reorganize and restructure its business. Still, the problem goes beyond just financial debt. Today, a huge portion of craft supplies can be purchased online within minutes through platforms like Amazon, Etsy, and other niche retailers. The competition has expanded dramatically, and convenience now plays a much bigger role than ever before. At the same time, some longtime customers have noticed subtle but important changes: fewer product options in certain stores, or sections that don't feel as fully stocked as they once did. It's not universal across every location, but it happens often enough to affect the overall experience that once set Joann apart. If Big Lots reflects what happens when families cut back on household essentials, then Joanne represents something slightly different. What happens when people begin cutting back on the small creative outlets that used to bring them joy? Because as living costs continue to rise, it's often those non-essential hobbies, the things that once made everyday life a bit more enjoyable, that get reduced or pushed aside first. Number 10 is Foot Locker. A company can lose customers, that alone is already a serious challenge. But Foot Locker is facing something a bit more structural. It's not just losing buyers, it's gradually losing the very reason people used to come to it in the first place. For years, Nike played a central role in Foot Locker's success. The most hyped sneaker drops, the most in-demand releases, and a large share of the chain's sales were closely connected to Nike products. That partnership effectively helped drive traffic into stores and kept Foot Locker highly relevant in sneaker culture. But then Nike shifted its approach. Instead of depending heavily on third-party retailers, it started focusing more on direct-to-consumer sales through its own website, mobile apps, and branded stores. And that change quietly reshaped the entire landscape. Once customers could buy directly from Nike with ease, the question naturally followed. Why go to Foot Locker at all? That's the kind of shift many traditional retailers struggle to recover from. In response, Foot Locker has been working through plans to reduce its store footprint and adjust to the new reality. But the pressure isn't coming from Nike alone. It also comes from how an entire generation now shops. Foot Locker once grew up alongside the era of shopping malls, when people would spend hours walking from store to store. Today, that behavior has largely been replaced by something much simpler: pulling out a phone, comparing options instantly, and ordering without ever leaving home. As mall visits decline, foot traffic to stores like Foot Locker naturally declines with them. And while sneaker demand itself hasn't gone away, in fact, people are still buying heavily, the way those purchases happen has fundamentally changed. That's what makes this situation so significant. Foot Locker isn't necessarily losing the sneaker market. It's losing its position inside that market. If Joanne represents what happens when households cut back on creative, non-essential hobbies, then Foot Locker represents something different. What happens when a retailer loses the very role that once made customers walk through its doors in the first place? Number 9 is Party City. Party City is dealing with a fairly straightforward problem. When household budgets tighten, celebrations are usually one of the first things to be scaled back, even before many other types of spending. That creates a difficult situation for a company built almost entirely around special occasions. Birthdays, Halloween, graduations, family gatherings. These aren't everyday needs, but they are the kinds of moments that people remember for years. After years of financial strain, Party City filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection while carrying over $1 billion in debt. As part of that restructuring process, hundreds of stores were impacted as the company attempted to reduce costs and focus on its stronger locations. But those financial headlines only became visible after a deeper shift had already started taking place. A birthday party that once might have included a large group of friends may now be limited to just close family. A celebration that used to be heavily decorated can end up being much simpler. Not because people don't want to celebrate, but because essentials like rent, groceries, insurance, and other living costs are taking up a larger share of the budget. At the same time, Party City's competitive advantage has slowly weakened. Many of the products that once required a dedicated trip can now be picked up during a regular visit to stores like Walmart or Target. Amazon delivers similar items straight to people's doors within days, and dollar stores often offer comparable decorations at lower prices. People are still buying balloons and party supplies, but fewer of them specifically rely on Party City to do it. In some of the remaining open locations, the effects are easy to notice. Fewer employees, fewer customers, and aisles that once felt packed with seasonal products now feeling noticeably quieter. A business can survive for a long time when it sells things people need. It becomes much more fragile when it depends on things people simply want. Party City doesn't sell essentials like groceries or medicine. It sells moments of celebration. And when those moments start competing directly with rent, utilities, and monthly living expenses, the pressure begins to show almost everywhere. If Foot Locker reflects how consumer habits are shifting in the way people shop, then Party City reflects something slightly different. How those same financial pressures are changing the way people celebrate in the first place. Number 8 is Best Buy. Best Buy is dealing with a strange kind of paradox that most retailers would rather avoid. People are still visiting the stores in large numbers, but an increasing share of actual purchases is happening somewhere else entirely. With over 1,000 locations across the United States and tens of billions in annual revenue, Best Buy once held a major advantage over online competitors. It allowed customers to physically see, touch, and test expensive electronics before committing to a purchase, whether that was a TV, a laptop, or another high-ticket item. However, that advantage has been steadily shrinking. These days, most of the research happens long before anyone steps into a store. Customers compare prices, read reviews, and check user feedback directly from their phones. So by the time they arrive at Best Buy, many already know exactly what they want. They're essentially just confirming their decision. And that's where the challenge begins. A customer might spend 20 or 30 minutes in-store testing a product, but it can take only seconds to find a cheaper price online. This behavior became so widespread that it even got its own label in retail: showrooming. The store becomes the place where people experience the product, while the actual purchase happens online where prices are lower. For Best Buy, that creates a costly problem. The company still has to maintain large physical stores, trained staff, and full retail operations, but it doesn't always get to keep the final sale. Over time, Best Buy has responded by closing underperforming locations and adjusting its store footprint in an effort to control costs. Still, profit margins remain under pressure because online competitors are willing to undercut prices aggressively. What makes this situation especially interesting is that demand for electronics hasn't gone away at all. People are still buying televisions, laptops, smartphones, and upgrading their devices regularly. The market is strong. The spending is still there. The only thing that has changed is where that money ends up. If Party City reflects how families are changing the way they celebrate, then Best Buy reflects a different shift entirely: how consumers are changing where they choose to complete their purchases. And for a retailer built around in-person shopping, that shift is incredibly difficult to fully adapt to. Number 7 is AMC. AMC is facing a challenge that no marketing campaign or discount promotion can fully fix. More and more people simply don't feel the same need to go to the movie theater anymore. That's a major shift for a business that used to be a normal part of weekend routines. For a long time, if you wanted to watch a new release, the process was simple. You bought a ticket, walked into a theater, found your seat, and experienced the film on a massive screen surrounded by a crowd of strangers all reacting together. Today, that choice feels very different. Going to the movies isn't just about the ticket price anymore. It also includes the drive, the snacks and drinks, and the effort of leaving behind a couch that's already comfortable and convenient. The pandemic only sped up this change. During that period, box office revenue dropped sharply, and AMC had to take on billions in debt just to stay afloat and keep its theaters running. Although audiences have returned to some extent, the recovery hasn't been complete. Now, a movie has to feel like a major event to convince people to leave their homes. As a result, big blockbuster films can still draw large crowds, while many other showings are left with very small audiences. In many places, that contrast is becoming more and more common. Importantly, demand for entertainment itself hasn't disappeared. People are still watching films and still making time for leisure. The difference is that a growing share of that entertainment is happening somewhere else entirely, usually at home, through streaming services and digital platforms. If Best Buy reflects how consumers are shifting where they make purchases, then AMC reflects something similar but in a different form: how people are shifting where they choose to spend their free time and entertainment hours. Number 6 is the Container Store. The Container Store is dealing with a challenge that many businesses would rather avoid. People still like the products it offers, but fewer of them see those products as something urgent or necessary. With more than 100 locations across the United States, the company was built around a simple promise: helping people create more organized homes, cleaner garages, and better structured closets. These aren't changes that transform life overnight, but they do make everyday living feel smoother and more manageable over time. That's exactly why the pressure builds so quickly when household budgets tighten. Very few people wake up thinking they need storage bins or closet organizers that day. Essentials like groceries, rent, insurance, and other unavoidable expenses naturally take priority over everything else. In recent years, the company has faced serious financial strain and has gone through restructuring efforts in an attempt to stabilize its business. But those financial outcomes are really just the final result of a much earlier process that starts inside people's homes. A garage organization project gets postponed. A plan to reorganize a storage room is delayed again. A few $100s that might have gone toward home improvement is instead reserved for more pressing bills. Individually, these choices don't feel significant. But when millions of households make the same adjustments, the impact becomes very clear. At the same time, competition has steadily increased from another direction. Many of the products that once set the Container Store apart are now widely available through retailers like Walmart, Target, Amazon, and even discount chains. The difference between specialized and good enough has become much smaller than it used to be. The Container Store doesn't sell essentials like food or medicine. It sells something more abstract, the feeling that your home and life are organized and under control. But when monthly expenses demand more attention and take up more of the budget, that feeling is often the first thing people decide to postpone. Number 5 is Express. Express is dealing with one of the most common fears in fashion retail. The world moves on, but the brand doesn't move fast enough with it. After years of financial strain, Express filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection and shut down dozens of stores as part of a broader restructuring effort. For a company that once had more than 500 locations across North America, that kind of contraction is significant. But those figures are really just the final outcome of a longer story. It starts with how people's clothing habits have changed. The business was built around office-ready fashion, the fitted shirts, tailored suits, and polished looks that were especially popular with young professionals entering traditional workplaces during the 2000s and 2010s. Then the environment shifted. Offices became more casual, remote work became widespread, and strict dress codes slowly disappeared from everyday life. At the same time, fashion trends themselves began moving at a much faster pace than before. A style can now explode on social media in a matter of days and feel outdated only weeks later. Brands like Zara and Shein adapted quickly to that rapid cycle. Express, however, struggled to keep up. In fast fashion, timing is everything, but the process of designing, producing, and delivering clothing to stores can still take months. By the time new collections arrive, customer interest may have already moved on. That delay creates pressure that builds up in the form of excess inventory, heavier discounting, and constant clearance promotions. In some stores, the effects are easy to notice: large spaces, fully stocked racks, and yet a lack of urgency in how customers respond. People still buy clothes, and the desire to look good hasn't gone anywhere, but fewer shoppers are choosing Express as their go-to option. If Best Buy reflects how consumers are changing where they complete purchases, then Express reflects something more personal: how quickly people's expectations of style and clothing have evolved, and how hard it is for traditional retailers to keep pace with that speed. Number 4 is Nordstrom. Nordstrom is confronting a reality that not long ago would have seemed unlikely. The customers who once spent long stretches of time browsing upscale department stores are showing up less frequently, not necessarily because they have less money, but because their shopping habits have fundamentally changed. For decades, Nordstrom stood as one of the strongest examples of the traditional department store model in the United States. That identity was once a major strength, but over time it has become less influential than it used to be. After years of declining sales pressure combined with rising operating costs, Nordstrom has closed several large locations, reduced its physical footprint, and pulled back from certain markets in an effort to protect profitability. But these business decisions only came after a deeper behavioral shift had already begun. More and more higher-income shoppers are now purchasing directly from the brands they prefer. With everything available online in just a few minutes, there's less motivation to drive to a mall or spend an entire afternoon shopping in-store. This pattern has shown up repeatedly in consumer behavior over the past several years. People are still buying many of the same products, but the department store itself is no longer a required stop in that process. In many ways, convenience has overtaken habit. At some Nordstrom locations, that change is easy to observe. The wide walkways, beauty sections, and carefully arranged displays are still there, but the level of foot traffic doesn't resemble what it once was. Nordstrom isn't losing wealthy customers, nor is it losing demand for high-end goods. Instead, it's losing its role in how those customers choose to shop. If Express reflects how quickly fashion expectations are changing, then Nordstrom reflects something broader. How even high-income shoppers are reshaping where and how they prefer to buy what they want. Number 3 is CVS. CVS is dealing with a problem that doesn't always show up clearly in financial reports. It's not just about sales or revenue, it's about time. Things that used to take just a few minutes now often stretch into much longer waits. Over the past few years, the company has announced plans to close around 900 stores nationwide. That's a significant shift for a pharmacy chain that serves millions of people every week. The demand for healthcare hasn't gone anywhere. People are still filling prescriptions and medications are still being dispensed. But the overall experience has noticeably changed. In many locations, more everyday products have been placed behind locked displays. Items like toothpaste, razors, and shampoo. Even relatively low-cost essentials now often require an employee to unlock a case before they can be purchased. The issue is that staff aren't always immediately available. That's a recurring theme in customer feedback, not so much about price, but about waiting. Waiting for locked shelves to be opened, waiting in checkout lines, waiting at the pharmacy counter, and then waiting again. At the same time, pharmacy departments are often handling heavier workloads with fewer staff members than before. As a result, long queues at prescription counters have become a common sight in many stores. CVS doesn't sell luxury or entertainment. It doesn't deal in products people can easily postpone buying. It exists to provide everyday convenience and essential healthcare access. But when that convenience starts to break down, customers rarely complain loudly. They simply start choosing alternatives that save them time. Number 2 is Neiman Marcus. Neiman Marcus finds itself caught between two different realities. The wealth is still there, but the visible display of it is slowly becoming less tied to physical stores. After years of restructuring and carrying billions in debt, the company has continued to reduce its physical footprint and scale back locations. But what's interesting is that its customer base hasn't really disappeared. Luxury watches are still being purchased. Designer handbags are still being sold. High-end fashion is still finding buyers without difficulty. The difference is in how those purchases are happening. More and more of them are taking place online, quietly, quickly, and privately, without a trip to a luxury department store in the middle of the city and without spending hours browsing in person. For a long time, retailers like Neiman Marcus benefited from the idea that shopping itself was part of the luxury experience. People didn't just come to buy, they came to browse, try things on, receive personal service, and enjoy the atmosphere. Now, that experience is being replaced by convenience. Luxury brands are increasingly selling directly to customers, and purchases are often completed in just a few taps on a phone, with products arriving at the door shortly after. At certain locations, that shift is already very noticeable. The stores still look polished and upscale, and the products remain expensive, but the level of in-person traffic isn't what it used to be. Neiman Marcus isn't really losing affluent customers, and it isn't losing access to the luxury market itself. Instead, it is losing its role as a physical destination in that market. If CVS reflects how people are rethinking everyday convenience, then Neiman Marcus reflects something more subtle. How even luxury consumers are changing the way they express and experience wealth. Number 1 is Dollar General. Dollar General is dealing with a problem that customers can notice the moment they walk through the door. No financial report needed, just the condition of the sales floor itself. With more than 20,000 stores across the United States, Dollar General became a common presence in small towns and rural communities almost everywhere. But over the past few years, a very specific scene has started appearing more frequently in some locations. Unopened freight carts sitting in the aisles, cardboard boxes left on the floor, and shelves that look partially empty even though inventory is still stored in the back room. The issue isn't a lack of demand. It's that many stores simply don't have enough staff to keep up with everything that needs to be done. In some locations, just 1 or 2 employees are expected to handle everything at once, running the register, unloading deliveries, stocking shelves, and assisting customers during the same shift. Inevitably, that creates visible strain. The result is what shoppers often notice first: cluttered aisles, slower service, and a shopping trip that feels more chaotic and time-consuming than it should be. That pattern shows up repeatedly in customer feedback. The pressure becomes even more intense when a company expands rapidly over a long period. Opening new stores is relatively easy compared to maintaining consistent standards across thousands of existing locations. Over time, that's where weaknesses tend to appear. Dollar General doesn't sell luxury products or discretionary fashion items. It sells everyday essentials, things people often need immediately or within the same week. That's what makes the situation more sensitive than many other retail stories. Because when reliability and convenience begin to break down in a store that people depend on for basic needs, customers usually don't wait long before looking for alternatives. Neiman Marcus is struggling to maintain its place in the world of luxury retail. Dollar General, on the other hand, is trying to hold on to the very role it was originally built for. After going through all the names on this list, the bigger takeaway isn't any single company. It's the pattern behind all of them. People are still shopping, still buying groceries, still picking up prescriptions, still spending money every day. What's changing is where that spending goes and how those decisions are being made. That shift may be the most important challenge retail is facing right now.